The Silver Eyes trilogy started out as one lone book that was later expanded into two more, and in nowhere does this show more than in the main character, Charlie Emily. The daughter of Henry, former business partner of William Afton, Charlie must figure out the truth about the history of Freddy's. A would-be novelization of the first three games, The Silver Eyes was Fnaf's first step into transmedia. It was where we learned the name of the killer, where we got actual human characters and real answers about some of the Fnaf lore, even though it was insisted at the time that it wasn't canon. Charlie Emily is eternally entwined with these books. While she was later introduced in the games, she was pretty much a name stuck on a familiar face, with no established character or story before Pizzeria Simulator. These books are where she is at her most complete, and that is why we will be looking at them. Looking at the creation of an interesting character and how she was all but thrown to a fire for a plot that slowly became more and more inconceivable. Let's start where it all began, The Silver Eyes. To give a quick recap, Charlie returns to her hometown and meets up with her old friends. They visit an old Freddy's and end up running across William Afton in disguise, who takes one of them hostage. Between getting attacked by the animatronics and trying to rescue their friend, Charlie learns the truth about what happened at Freddy's and more about her own family's history. In the end, she defeats Will by initiating a spring lock failure, like the one in Fnaf 3, and he's dragged off. The book ends on a hopeful note with Charlie prepared to move on from Freddy's. Someday I'll dissect the books deeper, but this video is more about Charlie, so I'll just go into moments that seem relevant to the video. So, Charlie herself is a pretty standard female protagonist. She has a tragic backstory and a group of undercooked friends, but where she stands out is that she's resourceful but not too resourceful. Due to growing up with a super paranoid aunt, Charlie is always prepared for the worst, but has an edge of a reckless streak. Nothing too severe, but there are moments in the book where she puts herself on the line on an idea, but they tend to make rational sense. She's resourceful, she's intelligent, but there is a sort of sadness that surrounds her. Likely because when we see her in the book, she is directly confronting her tragic past. You definitely get the feeling that Charlie's been in a state of repression for years and is finally getting a chance to ask these questions she's been holding back. She's pretty much one of the only characters in the book who reads like a person and not just a horror protagonist. Her arc isn't just to discover her past and end up stopping Afton, it is to come to terms with it. Which she seems to have done by the end of the book. She knows what was kept from her and gets some amount of closure about Freddy's. One of the neat choices with Charlie is that at the end of The Silver Eyes, she effectively rejects her love interest. This piece of dried bread is John, and yes, he does look like her father. John has pretty much no personality beyond love interest. Charlie is interested for some reason, perhaps because there was a childhood history. However, at the end of the book Charlie suggests that she plans on not getting with John because he will always remind her of Freddy's. That is an extremely mature decision for the book to make. And it's not disappointing either, because we've only known them for one book and they barely have any chemistry. Leaving it open is a pretty good compromise and much more nuanced than having them just be in love. Remember this point for later. But the bottom line is that compared to her one-note one-trope friends, Charlie's character was actually well-rounded and clear enough to differentiate itself. And so I don't have to introduce them later, here's Charlie's friends. John, the love interest. He's supposed to be a writer and he's supposed to be sarcastic, but he's plain white sauce on a plate. Jessica is supposedly her best friend. Initially introduced as having brown hair, she was redesigned in the graphic novels after one of the logbooks stuck her description under a picture of Charlie and made it seem like they were clones. She seems smart and rational enough in the first book with her having a fashion gimmick that pretty much doesn't have any impact until an out-of-place scene in the third one. She also pretty much replaces Charlie in the third book. Marla is the mom of the group. She has a brother who appears as the kid of the group in the first book, but then he doesn't appear again. Lamar is sort of the straight man, but he's written out after the first book. They literally just say, "Lamar called, he's never coming back." Carlton is the secondary protagonist. He's also the comic relief. He also has some of the most important scenes with Afton, including being the person who defeats Afton in the final book. Yes, Carlton the comic relief is the one who defeats Afton. Charlie isn't even present. I half believe he was supposed to be the John of the group, considering his connections to the story and his amount of influence on the story. But they couldn't do that because he doesn't look enough like Charlie's father to make it uncomfortable. That's a joke. It's because for some reason writers are afraid to have actual romantic chemistry between their leads, so they tend to lean on a boring love interest. Especially when they're trying to push a female lead. To be honest, when I heard that The Silver Eyes was going to be about the daughter of some character and her teenage friends discovering Freddy's, I was disinterested. At the time there was a slew of young adult novels with flatline female protagonist teens and I just was not feeling it. But much to my surprise, The Silver Eyes was actually a decent book. I don't think it's a great book, as it sidelines the animatronics for a lot of fluff stuff, but it isn't a bad book. More an adequate one. This should have been a standalone book, because Charlie's story is pretty much done by the end of it. Whoever was behind the Twisted Ones either never read The Silver Eyes or just didn't understand the basic concept of keeping a character on track, because it was a complete character derailment. Charlie's character is utterly assassinated. I'm sure you think I'm exaggerating, but I'm not. Remember that whole part about trying to move on? Gone. Charlie is now so consumed by the past and discovering more about it that it absorbs her entire character. Her somewhat reckless but mostly rational behavior is replaced by having little to no self-control with reckless abandon. Putting herself repeatedly in stupid situations for answers when in The Silver Eyes she might have had a better plan. Almost like she's been Flanderized. Remember how Charlie intended to move on from the past? Well, she has decided to drive full force into going to college beside Hurricane and studying robotics. She's so set on this goal that she starts sleeping in her car and begging to get in. She is all consumed with the mystery of her brother, which, by the way, has a very unsatisfactory ending. Spoiler alert, he never appears and her obsession with the door doesn't lead to anything. Also, remember how Charlie had hesitance in dating John? Well, now she's dating him. And it's uncomfortable. She spends the whole time thinking about her brother and distinctly feeling weird about the whole thing, and then just says something like it was okay without meaning it. I mean, what did you expect taking a piece of soggy bread to a movie? Recapping The Twisted Ones is hard, because it's less of a story and more a clump of moments vaguely resembling a story. In the shortest way I can describe it, Charlie is haunted by images of a door and animatronics are popping up around the city and killing people who look like her. These animatronics have magical little trinkets in them that make people hallucinate and see what they think they should see or what the user wants them to see and sort of flip-flops back and forth on how they work other than saying they're sound-based. I will tackle these little plot hole covers at a different time. The animatronics bury themselves underground and people know where they are, but don't do anything. There's a pizzeria built underneath Charlie's house that's also a giant cave with a waterfall, and Springtrap runs up and is like, "This suit burns better," and leaves. Charlie finds a door and believes Sammy's in it, and leaves without seeing what's inside, and it's another box situation. Then she rather suddenly is eaten, everyone thinks she's dead, and then sexy baby rolls up outside the diner and the book ends. That summary is exactly what it feels like to read The Twisted Ones. It's a mess. I know I have spoke ill of the fourth closet, but this is the book where the story starts to ooze all sorts of funk. Nobody else looks good either. All of her friends suddenly come off as super apathetic and out of touch. Clay Burke, the police chief and father of Carlton, who was present during the Silver Eyes, suddenly becomes completely incompetent. Afton pretty much pops in for 2 seconds and wanders off again. The ending is especially steaming. Without any build-up, Charlie is suddenly killed off. Except you know she's not really dead, so it's frustrating when the story effectively jumps ahead to her friends hanging out, chatting about her sudden death. As nutty as Charlie acted in this book, she was pretty much the one driving it. Without her, everyone just calls it a day and eats a sandwich. I don't mind the aspect of Charlie still dealing with trauma or even the frustrations of the situation, but you didn't have to make her into a completely different character. And you could have had all of this flow together a little better. If I ever do a deeper dive on the Twisted Ones, I'll flay it open further, but for now let's move on to the next book. Though before I continue I do want to say one thing, while I give the fourth closet such a hard time, I think the Twisted Ones does Charlie's character more dirty. Though the fourth closet doesn't do much better. Instead of being about Charlie, the fourth closet is a mess of ideas and themes poorly strung together, if not taken from other sources. The main characters are now John, and no he doesn't get any better, and Jessica. They are trying to investigate the mysterious woman who claims to be Charlie but everyone knows she isn't. Other stuff happens, like with Clay, but it's a lot of running around mostly. Eventually they find out that Charlie's aunt hid her in a trunk in her house and she is dropped back into the story, but she is not a character. No, while Charlie's character is slightly better than in the Twisted Ones, it is only because she has fully transformed into a plot device. She is the thing that John wants and the mystery everyone else is trying to figure out. She has a non-existent rivalry with Baby that goes nowhere, there's a shocking twist, and then she dies. Again. And maybe comes back at the end but it is never confirmed. With how fixated John is on Charlie by the third book, he might be hallucinating. Or maybe it's her twin brother. Have you ever listened to Harry Potter and what looked like a portrait of a pile of ash? It is an AI-generated Harry Potter short. Towards the end of the short, the AI randomly says something along the lines of, "The Dursleys never came to Hogwarts and they weren't about to in Harry Potter and the Portrait of Ash." This is pretty much the same way this book treats Sammy. After mentioning him frequently for 2 books, it's just like, he's alive. But you're never going to see him. The only reason this bothers me is because half of Charlie's character arc hinged on this long-lost brother. Not only did she not get closure, but the audience got invested in nothing. Charlie's romance also gets worse too. Her last words are proclaiming her love for John and there's a section where Baby tries to seduce him. It feels pretty out of place. Like a sort of high school drama. But not an actual high school drama, a high school drama aimed for kids who aren't even in high school yet. In a book that occasionally has people getting flayed open. But that is the least of this book's problems. Remember I said that Sammy is alive? Yes, that is due to the twist. The twist that Charlie's character was thrown away for. The twist that was implemented so that, technically, the games and books could maybe exist in the same universe. A bad twist that has now led to the game's story and characters constantly being questioned. And the only thing worse than the twist is the awful reveal that comes with it. It's not Charlie being a robot, it's the fact that she was brought to life by Henry's magic tears. I am not kidding. Henry wept into a doll with all his sadness and brought it to life and then used that to power his robots. But I suppose this makes sense. Someone once said that tears, when in the right circumstances, can hold a power so strong that it is like magic. I think it was the dolphin from the animated Titanic movie. Also, impeccable job of wasting more book time telling us how much of a perpetual victim Henry was. Not his kids, not his family, not the people who might have benefited from him trying to do something about Afton, which the games confirm he was capable of doing, but him. Charlie is not the victim. Charlie is, as treated by the plot, not even a person. She is a tool. She is the thing Henry cries about. She is the reason her family fell apart. She is the reason Afton's attacking the city. She is the thing John laments about. She is the MacGuffin of her own universe. She is turned from a character into an object. One that is just moved around from place to place. And yes, Charlie is a robot. See, even though Charlie remembers Sammy being captured. And even though a newspaper article or a witness should have been able to reveal this earlier, but the information was mysteriously purged from all records, she was the one who was taken. Or, that is, the real Charlie. She isn't even possessed by her soul, but supposedly is a sentient creation created by Henry's big sad. After he killed himself, her aunt was forced to take up the task of swapping out her bodies every couple of years, apparently never intending to tell Charlie. It's amazing, because for this to work this means that Henry created a robot that breathes, cries, heals itself, possibly grows hair, bleeds, and bleeds monthly. And that she never had any significant health issues or ever went to a dentist because X-rays would have likely detected the fact that she isn't a real human. And if she's using the illusion magic, then she's the only creation that doesn't cause symptoms from the illusion, somehow, as the illusion disc is said to cause headaches, dizziness, and nausea. Or general symptoms around those. One last note is something that my friend pointed out. Apparently Charlie being a robot supposedly explains why her mother abandoned her. But the silver eyes implies that not only are her and her mother in contact, and have met up, but that she feels some resentment towards her. If Charlie's mother really believes she's a robot and has no connection to her, why would she talk to her regularly and meet up with her? Why would she not tell Charlie she's a robot, or cut off contact? The fourth closet graphic novel implies that Sammy doesn't know he has a sister at all. I don't need to reiterate the gymnastics that would have to happen for Sammy to be completely oblivious to everything. It would make more sense if she said that he knows his sister died at least. Also, the dates are weird. As the same friend pointed out, to make the dates line up, this means that the missing children incident happened in '87. Charlie's birth date on her tombstone is different to the one implied in the first book, which means that there must have been a significant gap between her death and Henry's magic tears. But this is all small potatoes. Because her being a robot doesn't mean that they had to do her character so dirty. There is a show that a lot of people like, and I won't spoil which it is. The female protagonist is revealed to be a robot, and that's just okay. They don't proceed to dehumanize her afterwards. It's one thing to take away a character's humanity and an entirely different one to stop treating them like a human. And remember, these books were effectively good enough and Charlie's character was good enough that Scott wrote her into an intrinsic role into the game series. Yet the books slowly push her down the rung until she's just dangling on. Because one of the most important steps to writing a story is to make sure your readers cannot see the strings. That they can't see when you're moving your dolls around setting up shots. In this case, we can see every jerk of the author's hand. Likely because, and I cannot prove it, but I don't think the same author wrote every book. That would explain why the voice of the book, the behavior of the characters, and the writing style itself changes so much between them. But that is an explanation, not an excuse. It takes talent to lose the plot this badly. I just can't stop thinking of what Charlie could have been if she wasn't batted around and tossed aside. Like, let's do some quick math. Charlie is what, 18 during the later trilogy, and it's either 1995 or 1996. I can't remember, and it's close enough that I don't want to look it up. We don't know what year Security Breach takes place in, but they have things like iPads and technology we have today. Since Fnaf's universe has always had more advanced robots for the actual year, we could assume that this is a 2021 in a world where robots are more commonplace. Taking this into account, Charlie would be a spry 43. Not only young enough to still be a viable character in Fnaf, but old enough to even be Vanessa's mother. I'm not saying that's the route I would want to go in or anything like that, but I am saying that if left alone, Charlie could have returned as a character in the future no problem. Charlie started off as a good character and was ruined by the same thing that caused the Twisted Ones and the Fourth Closet to suffer. A lack of a cohesive narrative and a clear indication of where the story wanted to go. In the end, instead of making her more interesting, it just made readers lose investment, and it made the Fnaf books lose credibility. And I wouldn't be saying any of this if I didn't see that initial potential. It's like with Security Breach, my critiques are from a place of genuine care. Especially when it surrounds books and written works. I take writing very seriously, and I hate to see that wasted opportunity, especially when you can see what the problem was. In this case, likely a sudden demand for 2 more books and a need to stretch Charlie's character in a way that was unnatural. And thus, turning their protagonist into a plot device. Writing this has inspired me. I think I am going to make a video detailing what I might have done differently with the Twisted Ones and the Fourth Closet. Sort of like what I did for In the Flesh. Something for fun, to end on a positive note. To think about what might have been. But before I go, I have one thing to say. Plain white sauce makes your teeth go gray.